now with our first presentation. And I have the pleasure and honor of introducing Tracy Miranda, who is the Director of Open Source at CloudBees. She is also the chair of the Continuous Delivery Foundation, which is the CDF. And what they do is similar to how the CNCF hosts a lot of open source projects for the cloud native landscape. The CDF does the same thing, but for CI/CD projects and tools. So she knows a thing or two about open source and a thing or two about CI/CD. So super excited to have you here. Thank you so much, Tracy, and take it away.
Thanks so much, Julia. Yeah, really sorry I can't be with everyone in person, but happy to be doing this live. So I am going to go and share my screen. Julia, it just says host disable participant screen sharing. So if you could let me share, that would be great.
Yep, we're on it. I think Mike is on it.
And this is why the other talks are recorded today. That and because my kids are going to come in and interrupt at some point.
Perfect. It's part of the deal. You should be good now.
Okay, great. Can you all see? Okay. Hi, everybody. Julia, can you see my second slide?
Yes, we can.
Perfect. Yeah, so thanks very much for the introduction. I don't think I have anything to add to that. I'm coming to you live from Ottawa in Canada, and yeah, really happy to talk about the Continuous Delivery Foundation and all the exciting initiatives we have going on. And if there's anything, if you want to get in touch or ask about anything or follow up, best place to find me is on Twitter at Tracy Miranda. So just starting off with continuous delivery itself. So continuous delivery is a software engineering approach where teams will produce software in short cycles and ensure that that software can be reliably released at any time. So with the rise of microservices and cloud native architectures, this has really necessitated a rise in continuous delivery practices. And, continuous delivery is related to continuous integration, where continuous integration is the practice of merging all developer working copies to a shared machine. And when it comes to, continuous delivery in the context of the foundation, I like to kind of think of it as, rather than the narrow definition, it is CI, CD in the sense of continuous delivery, but also deployment. And what I want to talk to you today is, why this is so important and how, as a community in open source, we're all coming together to drive adoption of continuous delivery practices. So, just give me a minute. Okay, so we're really lucky in this day and age. We have this amazing research done by the folks from DORA, Jess Humble, Nicole Forsgren, and Jean Kim. So I don't know if folks have read the Accelerate book, but it gives super principles about effective ways to deliver software. And I love this quote from Nicole Forsgren, one of the authors. It says, software delivery is an exercise in continuous improvement. And our research shows that year over year, the best keep getting better, and those who fail to improve fall further and further behind. So Accelerate and the State of DevOps report sort of give us these 4 metrics and a way to get to them. And it makes you wonder, like, if this is so important, why isn't continuous delivery something that every single company or every single business practices for their software? And I think if we look at the landscape, we see that there are lots of challenges, and I like to break them up into these 3 main categories. First of all, we have an ever-changing landscape, and certainly with the microservices and cloud-native technology, that's meant, like a proliferation of environments we can release software for, and just different tools and approaches of how you do that. And then you couple that with the whole landscape of tools, and you'll see it's really, really fragmented, and it's not necessarily clear which tool does which things. Certainly when I came into the space, it was, what's a continuous integration tool? What's continuous delivery? What's continuous deployment? And you can get very kind of easily confused because there's so many different overlapping terms and they're not always used consistently. And then finally, of course, change is hard. We sometimes get set in our ways or in the ways our teams operate. And then to change that is challenging because, of course, there's people involved. And speaking of change, as we know, we're all having to deal with a lot of that and, just adapt to everything being thrown at us. So with, COVID-19, it was really interesting, this report that came from a company called Flexera, and they talked about how, companies are having to adapt. And the interesting thing there is both, enterprise and small and medium businesses are having to, they're looking at either higher or significantly higher than planned cloud usage. So it really is, the pandemic is accelerating folks adopting and automating technology. So the Continuous Delivery Foundation was set up with a view to helping address these problems. It was launched back in March 2019, and with 4 initial projects, which I'll speak about a bit later on. But yeah, it was pretty exciting there with the launch, and lots of recognition that this was a big step forward for the industry. This article from Forbes kind of gives an indication of that, and particularly the mission to say, okay, can we do something about all this fragmentation in the space? We had a number of member companies join and who have continued to join over the last year and fund the development we do. And we're particularly pleased that there's a lot of companies there that you don't traditionally think of as software companies. And, you've got a lot of banks like Capital One, and you've got folks like Salesforce and Netflix. So really important to have those end user companies' voice in such a community. So stepping back, we say, what is the mission of the Continuous Delivery Foundation? And fundamentally, we are looking to improve the world's capacity to deliver software with security and speed. And the ways we're going to do this is, by establishing best practices of software delivery and all the different things that go into that, help propel the education and adoption of software delivery tools, and also focus on cross-pollination across technology so that we can ensure, we're being effective with our tooling and not making life really difficult for users. So I'll say a bit more about who we are, but maybe this picture speaks a bit better. This is a number of our board members and heads of projects. And we were joined by Jez Humble, who wrote the book on continuous delivery. Just as a way to, we're folks who are passionate about this space and about helping people adopt open source technologies and deliver software. So we came together and we're sort of looking at a very wide remit of what we as a foundation can do. So I'm going to talk about a few of those things. Please feel free to ask questions. I will try and keep an eye on the chat as well. And yeah, I'll be around today as well for any further questions. So we've got a set of initial projects, which are different points of adoption. So you've got projects like Jenkins and Spinnaker, which are, past the early majority or late majority. Everybody knows Jenkins, lots of people using Jenkins and Spinnaker. And then at the other end of the spectrum, you have the cloud native technologies, things like Jenkins X and Tekton, which are focused much more on this world of containers and having building blocks that help you deliver microservices and work across teams so that you can constantly deliver, and in particular, taking advantage of technologies like Kubernetes. So we kind of see things at different ends of the spectrum. People have been delivering software for a long time, so it's very difficult to just ignore what's come before when we're helping people kind of make better use of the cloud. And so one of the initiatives which kicked off recently, we have a CI/CD landscape. For those of you who are familiar with the CNCF landscape, or sometimes called the hellscape, we wanted to dive into more of the CI/CD and what that means and how people can make sense of the space. So we've set up the different categories. This is a very early version, and in fact, we'll be working in the community to flesh this out and add more projects to it, just so it's more fully representative of the space. But it is, open source, and anybody can make a contribution. So yeah, I'll share the slides so you can have all the links. And then on top of that, we also have a big meetup community, which we use to kind of disseminate the best practices and talk about the technology. And yeah, we've got a whole set of meetups, and we encourage folks to run continuous delivery meetups locally to where they are. Well, certainly before pandemic times, but hopefully maybe in the upcoming months once things settle down. Okay, so I want to talk a little about tool interoperability. So one of the key things with CDF, and that I am particularly, I think is very important for the industry, is having standardized building blocks that we can use for CI/CD tools. And I've seen in other industries how this promotes innovation, because everybody's not reinventing the wheel again and again. And it makes it easier for you to sort of plug in tools, whether it's a security scanning tool or whatever. So in CDF, there's a big remit to drive for more common APIs and metadata. And how this happens is through a working group called the Interoperability Special Interest Group, which is open to anybody to participate in. So if you have a look at the link, they've got details of the minutes and the agenda items and when they meet. So one of the really interesting things from the first set of meetings, and we were sort of saying, okay, what are the things we can identify, and where are the ways we can push for the different tools to share code. We noticed that just straight off the bat that people were using different terms and they meant slightly different things. And then we sort of came to appreciate this as a wider problem, and not just within the tools of the foundation, but across CI/CD tools. So this led to us sort of creating this document, which is we're referring to as the Rosetta Stone for CI/CD, which is a way of mapping the different terminology across tools, just to say, okay, this is what it means in this tool, and this is the scope. So there's a whole lot more to this document, but this is just a table of the summary of kind of the key terms for each tool. And I encourage folks to take a look at that. Again, you can submit pull requests. It's all open, and we'd love to have all the tools covered there, so people can use this as a reference, especially when they're trying to kind of evaluate what works best for their particular solution. Okay, so, and from there, the interoperability group will be looking to do a lot more. There's a roadmap as well being fleshed out, but so I encourage you to check that out. And the next area I want to give you just a little taste of is we have a machine learning operations, or MLOps, special interest group. And when we talk about MLOps in this context, what we mean is the extension of the DevOps methodology to include machine learning and data science assets as first-class citizens. So, can we have version control for these? Can we have a way of deploying these, the code, the data, and the models, and have the tooling and the processes support that in a very strong way? And to say what it's not about doing things like putting Jupyter notebooks into production environments. So again, just going back to this idea of best practices in the CI/CD space. So the members of the working group made some contributions to the CDF newsletter. So I think that's a great starting point. So we have post an introduction. I highly encourage you to check out the MLOps roadmap, which is a work in progress as people sort of work out, what are the key things we should do as an industry to make things better. And yeah, there's lots of other interesting things on how you can get involved. So yeah, I'd encourage you to stay involved by signing up to our newsletter, which talks more about our events, our different working groups. There is a lot to the foundation. So today I'm just hoping to give you a glimpse into some of the key areas. But if you follow us on Twitter, that's also another good way to kind of keep in touch, or then kind of get your entry points into the different communities that may be of interest. So we have a lot of folks contributing to the projects. We have people engaging through our meetups, and there's also a number of courses that we run. So yeah, there's lots of different ways for people to participate. And as ever, please feel free to reach out to me if you're interested in anything, but perhaps don't know where to get started. I'm going to leave it there so we can maybe have answer some questions and see what folks are saying in the chat. But yeah, I would really encourage you all to join the community building the future of continuous delivery. Okay, I'm just catching up with the chat. So yeah, I see.
Tracy.
Thanks. How many minutes do we have to just answer questions? Or
we have a couple of minutes, and I'm gonna see if my colleague Phil can jump in here. He's gonna be moderating this. And so we have a couple of minutes, and I think a question. Phil, are you online? If not, I'll just proceed. So the question is, how do you get involved in or start a CDF meetup?
Yes, no, great question. So the first thing, and I will send the link to the slides, but check out the link to the Meetup Pro account. And the first thing is just to find out if there's a meetup in the area you're in. And if there is, I recommend, we can put you in touch with the organizers. If not, then you can apply to kind of run the meetup or have your meetup hosted by CDF. And I'll give there's a GitHub link where we have all the details. So I'll go dig that up and stick that in the chat. But
perfect.
Yeah,
for now, you guys are still using meetup.com?
Yes, yeah. So meetup.com is a good entry point. And I see, yeah, Carol in chat is doing a +1 for Accelerate. Yeah, totally love this book. I think it's, transforming how we think about things and what we should be doing. So yeah, strong recommend. If folks haven't read it, do get yourself a copy and check out the reports as well.
Awesome. Can you guys hear me now?
Yes.
Yes, awesome. Sorry about that. Some technical difficulties. Always like that. Sorry about that. Perfect. I keep saying that I'm being muted by the host. Can anybody still hear me?
Yeah.
Awesome. Perfect. So thanks again, Tracy, for this awesome talk. I do have some questions over here on my hand. And one of them is there any tips that you may be willing to share to help organizations embrace the change in software delivery? We often see that organizations have big software delivery cycle. Is there any small tip that we can give them to try to break that cycle down and help them move forward or embrace that new way of doing things?
Yes. So I think again, going back to Accelerate and Dora, they break it down by 4 key metrics. And, it's about how long does it take you to get a change out. And the other thing, so first of all, you want to get a sense of where do I stand on these 4 different metrics? You know, can I evaluate them? How often am I releasing? How long does it take for us to recover from something going wrong if you push a change that goes wrong? So step 1 is, you know, look at those DORA metrics and try to do an honest evaluation of where you are as a company. And then the second thing, you know, is to say, if we want to change these different things, what are the biggest constraints blocking that? And then again, the DORA report talks about, you know, pick 3 to 5 specific constraints and then look at solving them. And they actually have a really cool flow chart which talks about what things you can do to get better as a team delivering software. So there's they almost kind of map it up for you. So, you know, here's the process. This is what's worked for other people. Pick what works for your organization. Tooling won't solve all your problems, as it's a combination of process, tooling, and culture. So make sure you're looking at all those aspects.
Perfect. Awesome. Thank you, Tracy. And maybe a last question if we do have some time left. One is, earlier in your slides, you presented a slide that has like all the naming conventions. Like each software is using this specific buzzword for declaring something. Is the foundation also looking and standardizing the naming convention in their platform or API call so that it's easier for end user to change from software to software or not?
Yes, so we're definitely looking at that. As you can imagine, it's pretty challenging, especially for tools that have pre-existed, or, you know, different folks have different internal tools. However, I think it's still worthwhile, and we will be looking at you know, areas that will be easy to standardize or create adapters across technology, and even things for, you know, things you might not necessarily think of, like what's a standardized way to report test results for pipeline run. So we're breaking it down into different areas and then kind of working on the low-hanging fruit first. I think, you know, with microservices, there's going to be a new definition of what even is an application. And I think it's important we all have a shared appreciation for that. So CDF will be trying to drive maybe perhaps slightly more opinionated view of what that should look like. And we'll be looking to, you know, share code and APIs, but very, very early days.
Perfect. So thank you. Those are all the questions that we had over here, Tracy. So once again, thank you for joining us. Thank you for having this awesome talk and share that awesome information with everyone. And I wish you an awesome day.
Great. Thanks, everybody. And I'll be hanging out in the chat. So yeah, I'll stick some links in, but feel free to catch me there.
Perfect. Bye again.